Hey everyone, welcome back. I bet we've all felt that feeling of being just bombarded by the latest tech trends, right? Scrolling through your feed, and it's AI is writing novels now, and Web3 is revolutionizing the way finance works, and there's some new framework that claims it can just write your code for you. And it's easy to feel like you need to learn all of it right now or get left behind.
It's true. The tech world loves a shiny new toy. And that pull to stay on the cutting edge is so real, especially when you're seeing these advancements everywhere you look.
Yeah, and you shared a recent Stack Overflow survey with me that I thought was really interesting. Apparently, over 60% of developers feel overwhelmed trying to keep up with the constant influx of new tech.
Yeah, it's understandable. There's always a new JavaScript framework or a new approach to AI or another programming language promising to be the next big thing. It's a lot to take in.
So, for this deep dive, let's talk about how to navigate this tech hype train without completely losing our minds. We'll be using your note from CodeSkill Chronicles to help us figure out the best ways to stay relevant without sacrificing our sanity.
Yeah, because let's face it, you can't learn everything. And trying to do so can actually hurt you in the long run as a developer.
That's so true. I remember when I first heard about blockchain, I spent weeks building this really complex crypto widget. I was convinced it was going to be the next big thing. It ended up being totally useless, and I could have used that time to just really solidify my core JavaScript skills.
I think that's actually a really good illustration of a key point here. Focusing on depth over breadth is so crucial,
Mm.
especially for junior developers who are still building their fundamental skills.
So how can developers at different experience levels kind of hone in on their lane, so to speak?
Well, CodeSkill Chronicles has some great advice here. For junior devs just starting out, pick one thing that interests you and experiment with it on a smaller scale. Maybe spend a weekend building a small web app using a new framework, or dip your toes into an AI library with a small personal project.
Yeah, get a taste without biting off more than you can chew.
Exactly. Now, for mid-level developers who are already juggling projects and deadlines, it's more about prioritizing skimming over deep dives initially. Read blog posts, watch some intro videos, get the gist before diving into the really complex details.
I wish I had done that with Docker. I put it off for way too long, and then I had to cram a ton of learning into a really short time frame when we had a project that needed it. Not fun.
And then for senior developers, you're in a slightly different role, right? You become a filter for your team, evaluating whether a trending technology is really going to solve a problem you're facing or if it's just hype. Does it align with your team goals and roadmap?
Oh, man. I learned that lesson the hard way when I convinced my team to switch to NoSQL for a project. Seemed like a game changer at the time. But our queries became so complex, it was a nightmare to manage.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, but you have to remember that the buzziest technology isn't always the right tool for the job.
So how do we avoid getting swept away by all of the noise?
One thing I really like from CodeSkill Chronicles is this idea of setting aside a hype hour each week. This way you can explore and tinker with new things without letting it completely derail your schedule.
Oh, I love that. It's a way to stay informed without getting sucked into the vortex. It's like a designated time to check out what's new and exciting without that pressure of mastering it immediately.
Exactly. It's all about strategically allocating your time and energy. But knowing your lane and making time to explore new trends is only part of the equation. You also need to know how to decide which technologies are actually worth your time.
So how do we separate the signal from the noise? I'm guessing that's what we'll be diving into next. All right, so we talked about finding our focus amidst all this new tech constantly coming out. But what happens when you're in the middle of a project, you're trying to meet a deadline, and suddenly there's all this pressure to adopt the latest and greatest new thing? That's where things can get really complicated.
Oh, absolutely. It's like you're sprinting towards the finish line and then someone just changes the course. This could be especially overwhelming for junior developers who are still trying to wrap their heads around the basics.
I can only imagine, right? You're finally comfortable with your JavaScript or Python, and suddenly everyone's talking about this new language or framework that's supposed to be the future. It's easy to feel like your skills are becoming obsolete overnight.
And that's why it's important to remember that technology is always evolving, and your ability to learn and adapt is way more valuable than just knowing any single tool.
So, what advice would you give to a junior developer who's feeling that pressure?
First, don't panic. Just take a step back and look at the situation. How does this new tech actually fit into what you're doing right now and the project you're working on? Are there skills you need to learn to be able to use it? Ask questions, and don't be afraid to speak up if you need more time to get up to speed.
That's good advice. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement, but taking a second to figure out what it means for you practically is key.
For mid-level developers, the challenge is often like bridging that gap between the excitement of new tech and the deadlines.
Yeah.
You want to explore all the possibilities, but you also have to make sure that the project is moving forward.
No, I've been there for sure. Everyone's raving about a new framework, but you're the one who has to figure out how to integrate it without breaking everything. It's a tough balance.
Yeah, in those situations, advocating for a phased implementation can be really helpful. Don't try to change everything over at once. Start with something small, like a component or a feature, and gradually add more as you and your team get more comfortable with it.
And documentation is so important. Keep track of what works and what doesn't and any problems you run into. That information will be so helpful for future projects, and it can help your team avoid making the same mistakes.
It's like creating a map for other people to navigate the same terrain. Speaking of pitfalls, remember when you tried to implement Kubernetes in a single sprint?
Oh God, don't remind me. It was a total disaster. We missed deadlines, the team was stressed, and the project ended up way over budget. I definitely should have pushed for a slower rollout.
It just shows how getting caught up in the hype can really backfire. And this is where senior developers are so important.
Right. Sometimes you need to be the voice of reason even when everyone else is jumping on the bandwagon.
Exactly. As a
Yeah.
senior developer, it's your job to protect your team from making decisions based on hype. It's about making sure that new technology really aligns with your team's goals and strategy.
I've seen teams switch to microservices in the middle of a project just because it was the cool thing to do and it almost always ends badly. It's so important to ask those tough questions like, does this actually offer any real advantages over what we're using now, and is it worth all the disruption?
It's about making smart choices based on thinking things through, not just following the latest trends.
And even when a new technology doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that you failed.
Definitely, every experiment, whether it's a huge success or a total flop, teaches you something valuable.
Like that time I tried to use Rust in our project. It wasn't the right fit at the time. But I learned so much about the language and it made me interested in using it for my personal projects.
That's a perfect example of how failed experiments can still have a positive impact. Writing down both your successes and your failures is so important. It helps you make better decisions in the future.
It turns hype into something you can learn from instead of something that stresses you out. So we've talked about how to deal with the pressure of new technology and making smart choices about what to use. But let's not forget that exploring all these new things can actually be a lot of fun.
Oh, for sure. Hype, when you use it right, can lead to so much innovation and creativity. And sometimes just discovering something new is as important as actually using it.
Right? We're drawn to this field because we find it exciting.
Exactly. And it's important to keep that sense of wonder and curiosity alive. We do our best work when we're learning, trying new things, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So how do we find that balance between being good at what we already do and giving ourselves time to play with these new and exciting technologies? How do we make hype time a part of our work?
Yeah, it really does come down to balance, doesn't it? How do we make sure we have the time to explore these new things, but still take care of our everyday work?
I think it's about being really deliberate with how you spend your time and energy. Like you wouldn't spend all your money on random stuff. Right, you have to save some for bills and other things and maybe a little bit for something fun. It's kind of the same with your time as a developer.
I like that analogy. So, how can we actually do this? How can developers at different levels build in this hype time into their routines?
Well, if you're just starting out, it could be as simple as finding a project that you're really excited about, like maybe building a game in Unity or trying out creative coding with processing or even playing around with an AI library to make something cool.
Yeah, it's about remembering what got you into programming in the first place. Exactly. And then for those mid-level developers who maybe have a little more freedom, spending a weekend at a hackathon or working on a personal project using a new technology can be a great way to learn.
It's a good way to get some real experience without a lot of pressure, and you never know, you might even find something you really enjoy that you can use at work.
For sure. And if you're a senior developer, sharing what you're learning with your team can be really powerful.
Oh, that's a good point. It makes everyone want to learn and explore new things.
Imagine if everyone on your team spent just an hour a week experimenting with something new. Think of how much you could all learn together.
And CodeSkill Chronicles suggested using platforms like GitHub or CodeSkill.xyz to share your work and what you've learned with other people.
It's a great way to help out with open source projects, connect with other developers, and maybe even inspire someone else to try something new.
Yeah, it's like paying it forward in the best possible way. So as we wrap up our deep dive into navigating the tech hype train, I think the main thing to remember is finding that balance. We want to stay up to date and keep learning, but we also need to protect our time and our sanity.
We have to make smart choices about where we spend our energy and not get caught up in chasing the next big thing.
We don't need to jump on every new trend, only the ones that we're excited about and that help us reach our goals both at work and in our personal lives.
And before we go, I want to leave everyone with this thought. What's one thing you really want to learn more about, and how can you make some time to try it out without any pressure? Maybe it's that hype hour we talked about, or maybe it's something totally different. Whatever it is, make some time for it. You won't be sorry.
I love that. And remember, you're not in this alone. We're all trying to figure it out together.
The tech world is always changing, and that's what makes it fun. Embrace being curious. Keep working towards your goals, and most importantly, have fun.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That wraps up our deep dive into navigating the tech hype train. We hope you found it helpful and maybe even got some inspiration.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
See you on the next deep dive.